Hey, Laurel.
Hey, Jessa.
Who's our guest today?
We have Bill Halligan of Harrison Associates, and he is the president of the Association of Environmental Professionals, an industry organization in California. Thank you for being with us, Bill.
Absolutely delighted to be with you guys.
Oh, that feels good. Thank you. And
how are we introduced to Bill?
We are connected to Bill because the Association of Environmental Professionals is the go-to organization to meet experts in the field and connect. And I joined AEP, gosh, I think it was like 10 years ago, and at like a chapter level. And I was connected to you because of your role in leadership. And then we grew together, and now I'm on the state board of directors, and we meet all the time to work on AEP programs. And we were just talking earlier about how we don't get to see each other very much during COVID, but we're on the phone a lot, like on video calls a lot. So, yes. Bill, our listeners, our listeners are not all AEP folks.
Gotcha.
So let's start by explaining to our audience what the environmental industry is and what you do in it.
Okay. So the environmental profession can be a lot of different things, but generally, we're comprised of environmental practitioners, generalists that work doing environmental review documents pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, or the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. And then, there are engineers and water quality specialists and biologists and, climate change professionals, people working in the climate adaptation world, attorneys, housing advocates. It's kind of a big tent, and now a growing part of the practice, I think, is actually implementing some of the laws and regulations that we've enacted here in California, like trying to achieve net zero energy and renewable energy portfolio, and some of the things that you're doing, Laurel, and Devin and Devin Muto and the solar world and wind energy, and really trying to reduce our carbon footprint, as a state, and achieve, our broad and aggressive environmental goals.
I think that's a key point.
Yeah, I think that was a great question, Laurel, and great answer, Bill. But I think it's so important because my background is not in the environmental industry, as I mentioned. So I never get too technical, but I have worked at an environmental consulting company before, but my background's in business. And so I would meet so many people who, when I told them, oh, it's an environmental consulting company, they're like, oh, I do this, like I do, like air quality monitoring. I'm like, cool, we don't do any of that, because it is such a big and broad industry. And, in my role too, I would get, and I know with AEP, you get a lot of, prospective candidates, like looking for jobs and looking for advice to get into the industry. And so I would receive a lot of applicants for people who I would look as more as like activists. And
yes,
like, I care about the environment. I want to do good. I want to work here. I'm like, that's really cool. But like, you need to have like a technical skill set, if like you're applying to be, whatever, an ecologist or biologist, you need to look into this. But I think that it is such a broad industry that if you are strategic and you can take your skill set you have, you can get into it. So like you said, like, law, engineering, policy, all these things. So anyway, I think that's a great foundation for, getting into this conversation that it is a very broad industry.
Yeah, we have over 15,000 environmental professionals in California, and it's continuing to grow, and then membership of AEP, we're up around 1,800 members, which is up from about we were kind of stuck at 1,700, and Laurel's been doing a great job and getting the word out. So yeah,
Thank
it's the future. I think the future is definitely bright in the environmental practice.
I appreciate you saying that, because when we study environmental studies in college, it's kind of like the doomsday degree, where you're like, the world is effed. We're all effed. Like, what can we do? And that's why, as Jessa mentioned, we get a lot of environmental activists that want a job in the environmental industry. It's not just private sector folks either. There's a lot of public agency professionals. So people that work in city, county government, state government, federal government, and their job is either the stewardship of natural resources and like long-term monitoring and maintenance of these open spaces. And then there's also people that are responsible for reviewing projects. So if you want to build a house, a shopping mall, or even like a master subdivision community, there are people in the public agency that need to accept your application and review them for environmental compliance. So a lot of our industry is compliance related, not necessarily advocacy, until you get into policy, which is really exciting, Bill, because you're an attorney and you also have a role in the AEP's legislative committee, and you just came back from the state capitol. Tell us I know. Tell us who you get to talk to and all the things that you get to explain to them, and why that's important for people, lay persons as well as professionals, to understand.
Sure. Yeah. So let's see. I've been involved in AEP's legislative review committee for about 20 years. I've chaired that committee, and then for about the past 15 years. I've been participating in what we call Capitol Days. So once a year, a group of us go up to the Capitol with our lobbyist, and AEP has a great firm called Cal Advisors, Will Gonzalez and Matt Klopfenstein, who have just been doing an outstanding job for us in Sacramento, getting us connected with the right people, improving our our profile there in Sacramento. And so through the legislative review committee, we review bills that are proposed, related to the California Environmental Quality Act, related to housing, related to anything environmental, sustainability,
traffic, water.
There's a bunch of bills this year related to climate adaptation. So we have now, our profile is so strong now that legislators are reaching out to us, and it's really great. Last year we worked with the Assembly members Chiu and Friedman on AB 2323, and we were part of their working group. And then this year, they're working on a potential exemption for housing elements. And the proponent of that bill has reached out to us and really wants to get our input. So our goal is to really make sure that legislation achieves the intended goals, whether it's to promote affordable housing or to try to streamline the CEQA process for certain types of projects. We want to make sure that it really will result in streamlining without having negative consequences to the environment.
And it's really helpful to know, because sometimes the people that write the bills or draft or propose them don't know the unintended consequences of very specific words that go into the language. And unless you're a detailed environmental professional and practitioner for a long period of time, you're not able to kind of catch those. So it's really awesome for the legislature to say, hey, AEP, you are the go-to folks. You know all the things related to environmental laws. What do you think is going to be the long-term impact on the environment and or policies around or connected to environmental law that we're not seeing, that we're not capturing? And one of my favorite things that you had said was when you were in the Capitol Days this year in 2021,
which was virtual, by the way.
Virtual, yes, sorry.
Safely.
So the last time I was on an airplane was for Capitol Days last year in 2020.
Wow.
And so this year, all of our meetings were via Zoom, but it was still very effective. But hopefully, we'll be back in person next year.
And it was effective because I think you said you met with 12 legislative offices to brief them. Some of them are new, and maybe they need to understand what CEQA is in general. Maybe they're not even like aware, right?
Correct. Yeah. Some legislators may have come from a city council, so they'll have some knowledge of planning issues, urban planning issues. CEQA, the environmental process, but many do not, and many do not have a background in that area. So AEP, is here as a resource to them to achieve, their intended goals for their particular bill.
Can you guys, while we have you for a non-billable hour, all your jokes?
Oh, yes.
Right?
Oh, no, it's lunchtime. I'm not supposed to be billing right now anyway. It's
Okay,
my
great.
lunch.
Thank you. Can you explain CEQA and what it is? And I know, it's specific to California, and I'm, like I said, like kind of adjacent to the industry, and I know CEQA. I know a lot of people who are involved in real estate. CEQA comes up a lot, but can you give kind of like a simplified, I know it's like a super detailed technical process, but or policy, I should say, but can you explain it?
Sure. So, coming out of the 60s, there was a lot of social activism, a lot of environmental activism. And so as a result, at first, the federal government enacted the National Environmental Policy Act, which covers, federal activities. And then as a follow-up, the following year in 1970, California enacted the California Environmental Quality Act. And so its main function are, it's public review requirements so that decision makers are well informed when they make a decision about a project. So that would be a discretionary action that a lead agency is considering. So that could be a housing development. It could be, a permit to build a wind energy farm. It could be, a new park. So CEQA requires that we look at the potential environmental impacts of that project. We try to come up with mitigation measures that mitigate those impacts, or alternatives to the project that mitigate those impacts. But if we still have significant impacts at the end of the day, you can adopt a statement of overriding considerations, meaning that the benefits of the project outweigh the significant environmental impacts. So it's really the procedural requirements to go through this process, and also giving the public an opportunity to comment. That's a public and public agencies. That's a huge part of it. But then, substantive requirements regarding, mitigating your impacts.
I'll add that it's not an environmental compliance law per se. It's a public disclosure act. Mm-hmm. So there's other things like the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Federal and State Endangered Species Act, and the California Fish and Game Code, just to name a few regulations that actually protect those specific resources like birds, vegetation, air, water.
Water, yeah.
those specific things. And then CEQA goes, okay, there's all these natural resources that a project should look at and make sure that they're in compliance with and understand the level of impact this project might have, and tell the public about it and give the public either 30, 45, there's various windows, give the public an opportunity to look at the document and comment. So members of the public, lay people, you don't have to be an environmental professional. You can read an environmental document and say, hey, I don't think that you really, studied the birds long enough. I think there's other birds here that you missed. Or, hey, I'm really concerned about stormwater quality because I live next to the beach. Did you really look at that? Can you clarify? And by law, under CEQA, you got to respond to those comments. So it really makes this engagement with the public a requirement.
Correct. Yeah, it's all about public involvement and agency involvement.
And I think that's a key point because California has it, New York kind of has a similar one, and in the federal government has one. And there's overlap, but there's differences. And just overall for the layperson, this is another way to get involved. If you're an activist, this might be controversial, but the Sierra Club is an organization that has a lot of attorneys that are very sophisticated, and they review environmental documents and hold people accountable and hold their feet to the fire. And if you're a member of those kinds of organizations, your voice can be heard. If you're a member of AEP, we have a lobbyist, your voice gets to be heard. If you're a resident of the city or a county, your voice gets to be heard. So in my personal opinion, everyone should be taught CEQA and NEPA in high school as part of civic engagement, as part of being a normal human being in society. You should know where you can get involved in environmental matters.
Sure. The one thing I would add, though, is that, when getting involved, and I think involvement is great, but too often people get involved only for their own personal self-interest. They're trying to stop an affordable housing project in their neighborhood. They're trying to stop a waste to energy facility, a mile down the street, or they're trying to stop a new wind farm or a solar facility
because they don't want it in their backyard.
Right.
NIMBYs. That's
NIMBYs.
it. Not in my backyard.
In my backyard.
I'm a NIMBY for leaf blowers. Is there something for that?
Under maybe air quality, depending on.
Well, I think they're supposed to be electric now, so they still may be noisy, but hopefully they're not putting out any emissions. But they used to be, 2-stroke engines and, very smelly. But there are a bunch of environmental projects. No, there are a bunch of projects that have greater environmental benefits, but they might have a localized impact. So we need to think about that. The renewable energy portfolio standard. That's going to take a lot of work and a lot of projects to get to meet California's energy demands through zero net emissions. It's going to take a lot of work, so we can't keep fighting these projects and making it hard to permit them if we're going to meet our overall air quality and greenhouse gas emissions targets.
I mean, you hit a key point, though. I wanted to interrupt you and say, in the pandemic, people had to stay home, right? So
yes.
Los Angeles and a lot of other places that normally have impacts from traffic saw clear skies, were breathing clear air. And they saw that environmental quality is important and we can live a more sustainable lifestyle. Yet, that kind of work from a pandemic isn't regular, normal life. And so a lot of added work and a lot of behavioral changes need to happen for California to meet its greenhouse gas emissions goals and its renewable energy goals. And that's what Bill is saying is it's really troublesome when self-interested parties oppose a project that has a net positive impact and helps the state achieve its strategic initiatives, because CEQA and NEPA are often used to halt,
to stop or delay projects. And I would also put in there affordable housing and higher density housing near transit. I really feel that every community has has both a need and a duty to provide varied housing types at all different, at different income levels, so that people have an opportunity to live close to their job. We had, during the lockdown, most of us were working from home, and we saw those environmental benefits, of getting all those cars off the road. Just like you said, the skies were bluer. Like this spring, I saw a ton of monarch butterflies that I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Like, monarch butterflies used to be everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then this past spring, I don't know if it's related. This is totally anecdotal. I'm not a biologist, but there were birds chirping. There's all kinds of things. My wife and I were sitting outside during the pandemic and just noticing all these, changes in our own neighborhood where, I've been here for 20 years and she's been here for 15 years.
And here is Orange County, right?
Yeah, right. In Orange County, in Huntington Beach. So the affordable housing thing and the housing crisis is not just a social issue, but it's an environmental issue. We need to get people closer to their work. Commuting 45 miles or 50 miles to work is not good for the environment. It's not good for families. It's not good for us as a society to be spending so much time on the road.
I mean, I'm biased, Bill, because of the work I do. I think the solution is electric vehicles that are produced using 100% renewable baseload power that's geothermal. And that's because that's the world I live in. But taking a second to back up, you have a long history and experience and a breadth and depth of knowledge in the industry. How did this start for you? And why environmental professionalism for you?
Okay. All right. So I can't say that I grew up wanting to be in this industry. I probably wanted to be an astronaut or a pilot or a rock star. And so I started as a freshman at UC Irvine, and I was an economics major, but I was in the social ecology dorm at UCI. And so over time, when I had electives, I would want to be in class with my dormies. And so I started taking social ecology courses, and it turns out I loved those courses much more than I loved numbers. Just some of the, learning about Robert Moses in New York, and all of his redevelopment projects in the 50s and 60s, and Cabrini Green in Chicago, and that's where urban planning was kind of failed people and had bad consequences for lots of groups. But urban planning, I started to see that urban planning could also be solutions for communities. And so I ended up, halfway through college, I changed majors. I dumped economics and I went into social ecology. And then my emphasis was environmental analysis and design. so that's how I ended up in the field. And I remember my dad was a police officer. And so my dad's very concrete. He, when I said, oh, I'm taking social ecology, and he says, well, what kind of job can that get you? And and at the time I wasn't really sure. And then UC Irvine required that you do 8 units of internship. And so I was working for the city of Irvine in the community services department. And so I did an internship for Debbie Mears, who was a park planner. And I started reviewing EIRs as part of that internship.
Environmental impact reports. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I was always a strong writer, and I had good analytical skills. And so then I got out of school, and then her husband, Dwayne Mears, was looking for environmental analysts at his firm, the Planning Center, and sent him my resume, got a job, and I've been here ever since. And I found out I'm pretty good at it. So.
And why did you become an attorney? And what was the focus?
So I became, so it was the mid-90s. We're in a recession. I was still working full time, but I wasn't all that busy. And I was, I'd always kind of thought about law school, because I thought law school is about, cases and people, and it's less about numbers. So it was like, well, do I get an MBA or do I get a law degree? And I liked how law could, it could help me in my own career as an environmental practitioner, because that's what we do all day, interpret laws. But if I wanted to change careers, if I wanted to go, do family law, I could. I liked how varied it was. And just, once again, I kind of fell into it. My buddy calls me up, my buddy from elementary school, junior high, and high school. He's like, hey, my wife and I are going to take the LSAT. Have you ever thought about going to law school?
This is
Like,
What kind of friends do you have?
good ones. I have a good group of friends. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Let's take the LSAT.
Oh my God.
And then we both got accepted to the same school. And then I go the first day, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm not going. I'm like, what? I thought we were going to go to law school together. So I stuck with it, and he quit. So
I love this. This is making me laugh so much because, I'm teasing, but it's like, my friends are like, hey, we got a couple bottles of wine. What are you doing tomorrow? And, I'm like, man, I'm rethinking my friend group.
I have those friends too.
Cool. But I did something similar when I was in college, much different outcome. But I signed up. I'm like, I guess I should go to law school. That seems like a good thing to do. Signed up. I studied for the LSAT, signed up to take it on a Saturday morning, very, very early. And I had a very, very late Friday night. And when I woke up, I was like, I was not studying Friday night, for the record. I woke up Saturday morning. I was like, this doesn't seem like a good idea.
It's like
Nothing in my law career.
These moments in life that that change your direction.
Mm-hmm.
That simple decision of drinking the night before kept you from taking the LSAT.
You read through the lines there, huh?
It was on purpose.
Yeah, that was probably self-sabotage. I love it though. That is like such a fun story. I know. I think this is so funny.
I know.
It's like the LSAT. Okay, you show up, you pass it, you get into law school.
I just love how you just make it happen. You're like, man, I'm gonna expand my life now. No big deal. NBD. Where did you go to law school? And like, how was it?
Okay, so I went to Chapman University, and which it's locally here in the city of Orange, and So they were starting a new law school, and they were going to have a night program, and that was really attractive to me because there was no way financially I could have quit my job and gone full time to law school. So yeah, for 4 years, I'd work all day, jump in the car, jam up to Orange, and then spend 3 hours in class, and then every weekend was studying, reading case law, doing assignments, and then Monday started all over again. So it was tough, but well worth it. And then I just want to give a shout out to my professor, Tony Arnold, at Chapman. He's now at University of Louisville, but he led the land use, environmental and real estate program at Chapman, and so we were like-minded thinkers, and he was great, one of my mentors as a professor, but also a great friend outside of school, and we're friends to this day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that many of us in the environmental profession thought about going to law school. For me, it was Erin Brockovich, and like all the books I read in college, Rachel Carson, and all these really inspirational women that saw environmental quality having a direct impact on human beings and how it was not okay. And so I was like, there's something about the injustice of degrading the environment. I got into the environmental profession because I watched the biodiversity of organisms in the water decline. So like coral reefs and stingrays and sharks and all those like big things that you can see. Right. And then you start to get into the environmental world and you're like, man, there were these environmental disasters like chemical plants, oil spills, rivers on fire, like really insane stuff. Just a little bit ago, like not even just like a little bit ago, and how far we've come since CEQA was signed in 1970, and then the Clean Water Act in 1972, arguably my favorite, because that like you need water, clean water to live.
It's kind of important.
Favorite acts, you guys. So like
we're such nerds. We have favorite.
Thank you for saying that. I wanted to say it, and I don't know you well enough to say that yet, but took the words out of my mouth. Well, as you guys are talking about this and all these big problems, that come up as a result of environmental issues, and I was thinking about this earlier when you're talking about affordable housing and the goals. And so for me, and I think I view California as a leader when it comes to environmental policy. And other people, I think there's a view where it's like California is overregulated. It's too long, it's too expensive. And so, it's like, what is the trade-off of that? Like, are there case studies as far as like, California is doing things right and other states are following? And then, from your ability from a, technical and legal aspect to help influence the legislation, like, is there stuff being done to, I don't want to say deregulate, but like speed up the process to achieve these goals by the deadlines? I'm sorry, that's kind of like two broad questions, but break a normie.
Well, we have obviously a number of, competing goals, in our state and all communities, but we need to balance all of these things. We need to protect the natural environment, but we also, need to provide adequate and decent housing for our population. Because if you don't provide adequate housing, it's leading to a whole host of other environmental issues. Homeless camps, living in our waterways, living adjacent to our waterways, trash, debris, human waste ending up in our waterways. The people are here, so they, there's this thought that if I stop development or like no growth or slow growth initiatives, oh, I'm saving the environment. No, you're protecting, you're protecting your free flowing roads, and you're keeping lower income individuals out of your community, even though they're probably teaching your kids at school. They could be your local police officer, your local firefighter, the person you see at Starbucks. Shouldn't, I just feel like every community, needs to make a commitment to provide a wide range of housing so that people can live close to their jobs. And let's stop forcing people out of existing urban areas and into, greenfield development, beyond suburban development. Let's try to protect the greatest things about California, our natural environment, our coastlines, but still, we still have a duty and a need to provide for our population, to provide adequate housing for our population.
And I think when we talk about what are other states doing and is California leading, in some ways we do, because we have such a high abundance and diversity of natural resources, and there's such a high population and density of people. And when you have high density people and natural abundance, that's a lot of density of things, and this ecosystem needs to work in harmony with each other. Otherwise, you're creating this waste, either economic waste like negative externalities, physical waste that goes into the environment, but something is messing with that system so that we cannot live efficiently or effectively together. And that's something that happened in California for many reasons, because of natural disasters, because of public health issues. And now we see it happening in places like Florida that are really close to the water because they're super flat. And with climate change and the ice caps melting, the sea level is rising and going up through their storm drains and flooding all of the city where all the density is. So you literally have this like open space intrusion into this very dense human environment. And because they don't have these strict environmental planning and land use laws like California does, they have to react really aggressively right away instead of being able to avoid or minimize that impact from the start. So some states are like being forced to address these hazards.
Right. You bring up Miami. They've kind of, put their head in the sand so far. You've got, the city of Miami is 2 to 5 feet above sea level. And, and that's a lot of really valuable real estate. And there hasn't been any economic impact on real estate prices yet. But I'm just wondering, as we move into 2030, 2040, 2050, it's going to have an economic impact. So, Jessa, you were kind of talking about, government regulation and the economy and economic impact, but, they're all important. But if you don't take the right measures now to protect the environment, you're going to have economic impacts. And then in California, yes, there's a lot of environmental regulation, and maybe some of it is over-regulation, but the goal, I think, is to make sure that complying with environmental regulation is efficient. Like complying with CEQA should be an efficient process. Sometimes people use the process to delay projects, but if CEQA is done right, you should be able to get through an EIR process in a year. But it requires commitment, and the politics get involved, where if it's an auto mall, a city will rush it through. because of the tax revenue. If it's a housing project, delay, delay, delay. Not every city. I mean, there are a lot of cities in California that have made a commitment, cities and counties that have made a commitment to housing and affordable housing. But there's a lot of communities that are, it's almost a political death wish to vote for a housing project. So I get the politics, and it's a complicated issue. But I think politicians need to step up and be leaders.
Exactly. And that's why, in my opinion, environmental leadership is important because it's everything. It is public health. It is the reason we have politicians. You cannot live your life or survive or thrive without natural resources. And therefore, we have put all these regulations on them to make sure that growth doesn't happen unchecked. But that doesn't mean that it's no growth everywhere. And so politics come involved where they have to have the long-term view that if we're going to curb climate change, for example, or increase renewable energy or improve air quality, they're very, very hard targets to meet. And business is set up to make those changes happen sooner because we are not using public funds, right? We're using private funds, and we have the economy to develop, and we have all these things to develop. And so if you think about the environment as separate from a community or separate from the economy, you're doing yourself a disservice. If you look at the environmental leadership as leading economic development, as leading public health, then you can see the interconnectedness of it and make the correct decisions about housing and where that goes, and density and where that goes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, just like everything these days, the environment has been politicized. Talking about NEPA and the Clean Water Act and Clean Air Act and the EPA, that was all Richard Nixon, a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
CEQA was enacted by Ronald Reagan in 1970. And then here in California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, a Republican, was really a leader on climate change when he was in office. So, we're all on this planet together, Republicans and Democrats and independents and everybody else. I don't know how you can be, we have one environment, and hopefully this planet will be around so that my kids, who will probably see the year 2100 since they're only 7, I want them to be left a viable, healthy planet.
What does that look? Oh, go ahead.
No, that's a great question. I'm sorry I interrupted. I feel like you're in a flow. What I was going to say is, I'm thinking about environmental leadership and something you said earlier about people care what impacts them directly. And so, when I think about this, I get overwhelmed very fast because I'm a linear thinker. And so it's not a linear process. It's, very much, like you said, interconnected. It's very circular. And so, I'm thinking about the pandemic, I think is a very recent and good example of, public health crisis, shuts down the economy, improves the environment. It's this whole, everything was connected in that way. And so, and I feel like we reacted as a country very individualistic, and we're able to come together because if it didn't have a direct impact on you, it didn't really care. And so I think, we're known for having an individualistic society in the United States. And when we talk about these environmental issues, some of us won't be around to see them. And so it's well, as a leader in the environmental industry, how do you get people engaged, and how do you get them basically to care about something that may never really directly impact them?
That's a good question, because, talking about political involvement or showing up at a city council hearing, you might get a notice. And if you're for the project, you won't go speak at city council. If you get a public notice and it's a project you hate, that's when you show up. So, I think one of the good things about the pandemic and being able to participate in planning commission hearings and city council hearings from your home via Zoom is that we have now made it so much easier to participate in the local political process. And at least what I've seen on my projects, you're seeing a broader cross-section of the community participate, rather than just people that hate a project or are retired. That's typically who you see show up at a city council hearing. You're not getting a true cross-section of the community. And that's why you're getting so much opposition to affordable housing or higher density housing. I really like this YIMBY movement, Yes in My Backyard, and it's younger people, millennials that can't afford a home in California. They want to be able to buy a home in California and they can't. And so they're showing up to city council hearings and they're saying, this is a great project. Please approve this project. That's been a great thing. So I think we need to make it easier for people to participate.
I think that's a key practical tip. It is easy to participate now because there's online ways to engage. It's not an intuitive thing. Like a lay person isn't going to go, gosh, I wish I could participate in a city council hearing on a Thursday night. But this is also a discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because the people that are making decisions are only hearing from opposition from people who are not the people that are going to live in those affordable housing projects. So people of diverse populations now have an opportunity to show up and, as you said, support a project. So my recommendation to listeners is to find projects and write letters of support, provide written public comment or verbal public comment, as well as just get more involved in your local community, whether it's town council, city council, county board of supervisors, planning commission hearings. I would challenge everybody in the next couple weeks from listening to this, figure out what public hearings are available in your community and just see what people are deciding about and see if it affects you. I think people don't even know what civic engagement is at some point.
And kind of along those lines, like, I'll be in that camp, like, sadly, but what does it mean to write a public comment? Can it just be something as simple as like, yes, I support this, or no, or do you need to like write a whole letter?
It can be a short email, and it has an impact. I have city councils and mayors talking about how much correspondence they received, how many people are in favor of something and how many people are opposed to something. So it has an impact, even if it's a short little email.
And I also come from the idea that there's projects that we're developing and there's policy that we're developing. What are some ways that you show up as an environmental leader at home or at work, aside from being an environmental professional? What are some very small, practical ways that people can change their behavior in support of these larger, big ideas that you sort of lead in the state capitol?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I reached out to Rich Walter at ICF, and he turned me on to this. It's a blog from Columbia University, and it's called The 35 Easiest Ways to Reduce Your Carbon Footprint. And it goes through a whole bunch of little things that we all can do in our lives, like food, eating low on the food chain, choose organic and local foods. One thing that my wife and I did, we have a small lot in Huntington Beach, but we took a portion of our front yard and we made a garden, and we we've grown tomatoes, we've grown cucumbers, we grew pumpkins for Halloween. And I forgot what a homegrown tomato tastes like. Like, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And like doing little stuff like that. Some of the other things they mention, you know, don't buy fast fashion, buy vintage, buy less stuff. You know, bring your reusable bag, which is, you know, we in California we have to do that. You know, and then like in the workplace, but both at my old firm and at my current firm, we are looking at what the future of the work environment looks like. And now that we've seen what it's like to let employees work from home for a year, and it's been very positive. Productivity's up, profitability's up, at least, you know, in service industries. That takes, you know, tons and tons of you know, carbon emissions out of the air just by working from home. And so going forward, you know, we're looking at a hybrid model of you know, maybe going into the office one day a week. If you know, set up all your, you know, internal meetings where, like, if you need to do a personnel review or a staff review, set that up, set them all up on the same day, and then reduce the number of times you're on the road commuting. And now with Zoom, like, you know, platforms, Microsoft Teams and Zoom, and we see how effective we can be just through this platform. I don't need to fly up to the Bay Area to meet with other members of my company. You know, that's gonna, I think that's a long-term change that's really going to have a huge effect. You know, yeah, on the Columbia blog, it says drive less. That's one way to drive less, is let employees, you know, give employees, you know, options. You know, so there's a lot of good stuff in here. It's
I mean,
yeah, just
go ahead.
Well, yeah, just it's a blog by Columbia University, the 35 easiest ways to reduce your carbon footprint.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And, you know, I miss you. I want to see you in person. I want to get in my car. I want to see you. And I want to see you not only for your technical skills and the lovely leadership you do through AEP and through your day job, but also because of your hobbies.
Uh-oh, where's this going?
I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share your favorite extracurricular activity in the music space. Share a little bit about your background in a band, and if you feel so inclined, perhaps give us a little ditty.
All right. Okay. So, in addition to being a CEQA practitioner and lawyer, I am a part-time, I'm not going to say rock star, but rock aficionado.
Rock God.
My wife says I play in too many bands, but so I have an originals band called Velicious. I play with some other guys in a band called Sound Cake, and we do a lot of covers. And then I also play in the AEP band, which is made up of environmental professionals and planners, and you know, that band is a totally different thing. Like, that set list is all over the map because we have members, you know, we have members that are 30 and we have members that are retired and, you know, they're approaching 70, but it's all
18. We have young members as well.
Yes. But it's I just have a blast. You know, my originals band, Velicious, we played the Sunset Strip, the Whiskey a Go-Go. We played the Hard Rock Hotel in Vegas. You know, we have a blast. We go, you know, it's my, the closest thing I'll ever be to being a rock star. Like, we don't trash our hotel room, but we get a nice hotel room up at, you know, on the Sunset Strip.
Wait,
and
Bill, we do. AEP, the AEP band, and we trash the hotel rooms.
That's true. But my band, we try to be respectful of hotel rooms.
Well, we usually wrap up our interviews with the 3-point landing, or 3 key takeaways that you want our audience to remember from this experience. I don't know if you can say the 3 things as you strum the guitar, but we'd love to hear what you want our audience to remember.
Okay, the 3 takeaways I think would be, you know, opposition to certain types of projects, you know, mixed use, affordable housing, renewable energy. That's not necessarily good for the environment. You know, and then I think the housing crisis and homelessness in California, that is not just a social issue, that is really an environmental issue. And then also slow growth and no growth initiatives in urban and suburban areas. It's not always about saving the environment. It's about getting through stoplights faster. You know, it's about preventing higher density housing. So just be aware, you know, I think that the environmental message gets skewed oftentimes.
Yeah, agreed. And
so, and just, you know, be involved. I think, you know, vote, you know, participate at the local level. So that's what I would say.
Thank you.
And
that was
if you want, I can, do you do a fade? Or
yeah,
how do
you fade?
This is great because there's always like an awkward pause because the way our system is, so we just have to sit here. So yes, you
take us home.
Bill. Yeah.
Right.
Take us home, Bill.
All right, I'll start playing, and then and if it goes to black, I'll assume that we're done.
It will end broadcast.
So okay. When it says end a broadcast, I can stop playing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Here it goes. We both lie silent still in the dead of the night. Although we both lie close together, we're still miles apart inside. Was it something I said or something I did? Did my words not come out right? Though I tried not to hurt you, though I tried, guess that's why they say every rose has its thorn. Just like every night has its own. Just like every cowboy sings a sad, sad song. Every rose has its thorn.
Woo!
All right.
Oh, send it, Jessa.